Welcome to Real Estate Success DFW, the podcast where top producing agents from Dallas-Fort Worth come together to share their stories and strategies behind their success. I'm Shaune Corbett, your host, and with over 300 million sold in the local real estate market and the honor of being best of D multiple times, I know what it takes to make it in this market. Each episode, we're going to dive into the world of real estate, learning from the very best in the industry. If you're ready to level up your game, you're in the right place. Let's get started. Hey everyone, Shaune Corbett here. We are Real Estate Success DFW, and I have a celebrity on the call with me. His name's Dillon McDonald. And how are you, Dillon?
Man, I'm doing blessed, man. I'm great.
So Dillon runs a high-producing team here. We're actually both in Grapevine. Well, he's kind of Grapevine, Colleyville. Is that kind of where the Wall Team focuses?
Yeah, we're in Colleyville, yeah.
Yeah, my office is actually in Grapevine. I didn't share that with you, so I'm not too far from the Wall Team.
Nice.
But Wall Team pretty much dominates that particular space and area, and they have a good-sized team, but they're really hyper-focused on where they're at and what they're doing in that specific space. And Dillon actually runs the team. And he's been doing that for a while. We're going to talk a little bit about his background, but I want to kick off a few things just for context so you understand a little bit more about Dillan McDonald. He's a UT grad, economics 2006, got into business 2009, so he's been licensed for 15 years. He began with RE/MAX, and then that was 5 years before joining the Wall Team in 2014. He's currently a broker supervisor. We talked about that over the Wall Team Realty Associates in Colleyville. And all of us, including myself in the area, we all know who the Wall Team are. They sell a ton of real estate, and we have a lot of respect for what they do. He's done over 950 transactions, which I can't even imagine. I've got a pretty good transaction count for myself, but it's not even close to where Dillon's at. So that's incredibly impressive. Basically averaging 22 million in sales for the past 10 years. He graduated from the MetroTech's Leadership Program 2021, and awarded MetroTech's 40 Under 40 Award, which is another prestigious award. Currently, high-producing team, 10 agents, and they're on pace to do 155 million here in the area, which is very high volume. We are not California. We do not sell $4 and $5 million houses here. We sell probably average, what do you think, 600, 700,000?
Yeah, that's about our average price point is around 650.
So you got to sell a lot of houses to get to 155 million in our market. So that's incredibly impressive. I really appreciate you jumping on with us.
I appreciate the invite.
Sure. All right, let's talk a couple things. We've talked a little bit about the background, and one of the things I know that's setting you apart, and this is really relevant to me. I owned a brokerage for about 10 years. I had about 10 agents on my brokerage, but if you don't have 40 agents, you're probably going to be in production, is the way most brokerages are set up, unless every agent is a producing agent and they sell a lot of real estate.
Yeah.
So you got kind of a point in time where you're still going to have to do production. But the benefit of that, and what you and I were talking about, is because you're in the field and because you're selling real estate, you can actually advise them, coach them, and give them insights on what to do and how to handle situations. You're not just the removed broker that only handles broker liability issues, right? We're also going to solve real estate problems, which is a huge value add.
Yeah, that's one of the things I'm honestly most passionate about, is just given the experience I have is helping other agents really get through the muck, so to speak. There's a lot of complicated things in our industry that are always changing. And so if you're not actively doing it, it's hard, in my opinion, to be a good value provider to your team members when you're sitting in a glass house somewhere. You're not actually in the trenches. So
100%.
I think it's important to be in it, involved in it. It's not all perfect all the time. As someone always tells me, it's not all profit, no problems.
No, if it were, we would have a lot more agents and a lot less problems, and it wouldn't work. You got to have a problem to solve. I know sometimes you get buyers and sellers that are like, well, what do I need an agent for? And we're looking at it like, unless you're doing this every day, I can't even imagine why you would put all of the risk on the most expensive asset that you have without any experience doing it. It's really naive to kind of approach things this way.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, having done it full time for 15 years, I've seen all the things that can go wrong. And so I think if people really knew the extent of what the downside is of not knowing the pitfalls along the way,
Mhm.
Yeah, you're setting yourself up for a potentially big problem.
Yeah,
So,
for sure. Yeah. And they won't know until they know. Sometimes the pain
right,
comes after they realize. And sometimes they still don't know what they really lost by the time they get through the whole thing because they don't know what success looks like. They're not selling
right,
houses every day.
right.
So you've got a pretty specific experience and background. What's really led you into getting into real estate, right? So you went to UT, got an economic degree. You worked
Hmm.
at Remax, and then now you're at the Wall Team. What kind of put you in that space, or why even get into real estate? I wonder why people even sell real estate sometimes.
Well,
So,
how do people get into real estate? To be completely honest, in 2009, I was working for an engineering company in Dallas, like kind of the correct thing you're supposed to do. You graduate college, you go work for a big company, and was doing great there. But the financial crisis happened, and our engineering company CEO came out and said, "We're letting go half of the company. Whether you've done a great job or a bad job, you're getting let go." And that was a real eye-opening experience for me because I was the guy that was showing up to work before everybody else. I was the guy that was staying late, and to potentially be put on the chopping block when I was actually excelling and doing quite well for nothing in my own control, I guess you could say. The
sure.
economy was changing, and so they weren't making the money they needed to support certain salaries. And that was a real eye-opening experience for me when I was like 24 of going, wow, like I was doing everything right, above and beyond anything they ever asked me to do, and I'm potentially going to get fired. So that got me into a different mindset of going, okay, if I'm going to make it or I'm going to fail, I'm going to get into a business that I'm going to fail because I failed, not
Yeah.
because of some other external power, external factor that caused me to lose my job. So I looked at real estate as a huge opportunity. I felt like there was a lot of just, it's funny, having never bought a house, never done a real estate transaction, my impression of the real estate community was relatively low. And so I thought to myself, well, if I'm honest, I'm a hardworking, educated person who treats people right. This seems like an industry that I could do really well in. And so then I started pursuing getting my license and getting into real estate. So
I like that. You chose to be the entrepreneur that was on you, not on someone else that takes away, that controls your future.
yeah.
You took the future and put it in more of a space that you could control.
Well, and I think what the biggest misnomer is about people like the term job security, right? So, like, what does that actually mean? I think that's an interesting question for people to ask themselves because I had a very secure job on paper.
You thought, yeah, yes,
You
yeah.
know what I mean? So, like, but yet I was being told. So, I think it's actually less risky to be in an entrepreneurial business where you can put in the hours you need to put in to invest the time you need to invest in yourself to do the things that will produce an income and a lifestyle for yourself versus I think it's actually more risky being involved in a big company where anything at any time can happen out of your control and now all of a sudden you're out of a job.
Yeah, it's kind of ironic that this would happen to you in 2009, and that's when you made the decision.
Yeah.
That was not a very good time for real estate, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, it was actually pretty bad. It was funny though, because I credit you kind of read off some of the stats or whatever earlier, but like I credit where I'm at today because of the timing I got into the business because I lost money my first 2 years, literally on my tax return, lost money my first 2 years in real estate. And I lived off of, it's kind of a funny story. Ended up leaving that job in March of 2009. I got married July of 20 of that same year. And so I had to go tell my in-laws that their future son-in-law is going to be unemployed getting into real estate, which put actually a lot of pressure on me to perform. But my wife was a teacher and we literally, the two of us lived off of her teacher salary for 2 years with the mission and the mindset that if I can make it, if the market would turn, if I could get better, she believed in me, her family believed in me, my family believed in me. And we eventually got to a point where our dream was to have kids and be able for her to stay home with the kids. And that's what she's doing now. But those first 2 or 3 years where I was out and running around doing rentals, putting door to door, going door to apartment complexes, who's going to buy this year, I was doing everything I could do to kind of get going. And that experience helped me cut my teeth in a really down market to know how to succeed and eventually grow.
I like this. This is going to lead us into the work-life balance. I want to talk a little bit
Yeah.
about that. That's a real passion that I have. And you and I are very similar. I have 4 kids and my wife's a teacher.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah. And my
Cool.
objective is I don't like the direction of the school district. I don't like the direction of what it expects and the expectation on the teacher. It's
Yeah.
very hard on her, and it makes it
Yeah.
harder every single year.
Yeah.
You get more and more challenging students, and you teach to the data. And teachers become teachers for kid relationships, and they
Right.
suck the life out of that opportunity. They turn
Yeah.
them into
That's
these
tough.
data machines. That's more important than I want to get to know them and how to really connect and relate with them. They suck a lot of that energy out of it. It's really frustrating to watch it. But I want her home, and
Yeah.
I'd like to go to a private school or something for our kids, I think, long term.
Yeah.
So that's fascinating.
Yeah, it's so my mom was an educator, my wife was a teacher, obviously. My mother-in-law, my sister-in-law, my sister is currently an assistant principal. So we have a lot of teachers in the family, and I know this is a real estate podcast, but I agree that it's a tough position teachers are in today versus I think like when we grew up in that environment. So it's tough for sure.
So let's talk a little bit about the work-life balance. So
Yeah.
most agents, by default, they're working weekends, they're working evenings,
Yeah.
they time block their cold calling, they do all these standard things. And like you could probably appreciate that you're being a realtor and her being a teacher has conflicting schedules,
Yeah.
right? She's home when you got to be working,
Yeah.
and vice versa. So how do you have a work-life balance?
Well, that ties into the team and why the Wall team has honestly been the greatest, maybe one of the greatest gifts I've ever had in my life, to be honest with you, because as a standalone agent, when I was with Remax for those 5 years and everything fell on me, it was really, honestly, it was really difficult to have a great work-life balance, especially when you're trying to make it, when you're trying to actually get to a point where you could see a future. It was really hard. And being a part of a team where you have a lot of administrative support and a lot of help and also a lot of camaraderie within your own teammates to cover for you. Like I haven't had a vacation probably in the last 5 years where I haven't had at least 5 or 6 people on our team covering for me during the time I'm gone. You cannot put a price on being on a vacation as a real estate agent and knowing that
And
you
being
actually
detached and being
are
detached.
like actually able to unplug because
Yeah.
you have people that you actually know and trust that are helping facilitate showings, writing offers, are not asking for anything in return, but we all like scratch each other's back when we need it. And that has really helped to create some boundaries in my life relative to my home life because I want to be a great husband. I want to be a great dad. And real estate doesn't always set up for that. Like it's tough. I mean, especially when you're producing at a high level and you have a lot of clients and it's a lot of demands on your time. If creating that balance to me was when I joined the team 11 years ago that's why I said it's been the greatest gift because it taught me how to have balance and to let go of the things that other people can do. And I'm only now focused on the things that only I can do. And so I'm working the same amount of time, but I'm actually much more productive. So that has been a huge blessing to me being a part of this team.
I love that. I do specific targeted training, and my third phase of my training is scalability.
Yeah.
And that's where we're going to be going from, 5+ transactions a month and learning how to do it at a higher dollar per hour time spent. Right.
Yeah.
Like I don't show houses. I don't even have a listing presentation, right? Because I only work with people that know me. And I think when you can build a level of referrals that only people that are referred to you do you work with, you get to decide who you work with. You can decide when you work. And that really makes things a lot easier.
That's a beautiful, I wish more agents would take the time to invest in understanding their options as realtors. I think most people that get into real estate have this idealistic image of like the freedom of time, which I think is the most backwards thing about our business. It's the last, like if you end up being successful in real estate, you don't have freedom of time.
Well, you're an employee to some point, right? At some point, you've got a serious buyer. You got to make it work. But there are effective ways that you can set things up. Like I have a buyer that they're buying probably about 2 million in Flower Mound, Bartonville. They're looking for a particular size property. And I tell them the days that we're going to go look at property, and that's the days we go look at property. I don't wait for them to pick up the phone and say, "Hey, can you show up here at 6:00?" I was like, "No, I've got 4 kids, and that's not going to work." And I'm not mean about it, but there are effective ways you can put it back on them in a way that says, "Hey, let's both work together," but you don't want to be an employee.
I think someone told me this very early on in my career, and this has always stuck with me. And it was, you don't call your dentist and the day before you have a dentist appointment and demand to go see him at 3 o'clock with no plan. I mean, and we don't often get looked at by the general public as professional services, but that really is what we are. And I think if more agents would be proactive in their communication with their clients, kind of like you, and setting expectations. Like, as a matter of fact, like on our team, we have a buyer consultation where we ask people to come into our office, spend an hour, and if they will spend the 1 hour with us up front, it honestly saves them a lot of time on the background. And then on our end, what we like to do is communicate expectations. And so, like, we have a guy in our office, Michael, who he wants to have a Sabbath day every week. And so that is usually on a Thursday, Thursday evening at 5 to Friday evening at 5, where he is for 24 hours unplugged. And he communicates that to the clients when they come in and say, hey, is this okay? Does this work for you? This is something for me that's important. And so from Thursday at 5 to Friday at 5, I'm not going to be available to return phone calls, to show properties, to whatever. And he's been on the team, I think 12 or 13 years, and has run into very little resistance. Most people are very understanding. Most people are like, oh my goodness, yeah, of course, like, take that time. I think we're scared a lot of times to tell people that, for fear that they may go, oh, well, he doesn't have time for me, he's too busy for me, or whatever.
Well, you set the expectation up front.
Yeah, if you're honest, I think people respect the honesty. I think it builds trust. I think that for him, if he says, look, I'm your guy 6 out of 7 days a week, 24/7. But this 24-hour period, I need, to be able to unplug to serve you the best I can during the other 6 days a week. People respect that. And then they know if he's being honest with me now about this, he'll be honest with me in the future about other things. And it actually is a great way to build trust with your clients.
I love that. We have a Sabbath as well. We do Sunday, which I know is not the most friendly for real estate in the real estate business, but ours is specifically around technology. We have no TV. We have no iPads. We have no phones, no nothing.
Wow.
And then we do family intentional. And you got to be intentional, right? I mean, you want to be a great father. We always talk about intentionality. So we intentionally set aside all that, and we only do things together. Now, we'll go to people's houses. We'll do lacrosse tournaments, because for me, that's leisure to me to go sit and watch my son play lacrosse. Sure. I love it. I enjoy it. It's good for our family. It brings us together, and we don't have to have technology to do that. So you can implement Sabbath in other ways as well. But I think that's fantastic that someone will actually fully unplug for 1 day a week. That's a tough thing to do, and it's very good for you.
Well, you can only really do that if you have a team, or you at least have some sort of assistance from other people. So,
sure.
Because there are times when a client, based on a property coming up, needs to go see that property, so someone else on the team can go show it.
Yeah.
And then when it comes time to write the offer the next day, then he's available, he can jump back in. So, again, that's a big deal.
Yeah. And part of building, we won't go much detail on the scalability, but building a scalable business, you've got to have a contract to close. You've got to have VAs helping with social media, and you also have to have other agents that you can partner with within your own team space to collaborate. I think anyone starting in real estate, I can't imagine, like, you did it the hard way. I wouldn't say I did it the hard way. I wasn't on a team. I never even worked for a broker in my life. I just got a license. And then I thought, whenever I was creating my brokerage, what would be a value add if it were me working for me? And I came up with my own system and my own scale and everything. I even created my own contract to close coordinator for all of my agents. So I knew I didn't have to micromanage the contract. Someone else would do that for me. Yeah. And it was a value add that I could offer agents. Anyway, so I was doing all of that, and I didn't work in a team, but I look back now, for anyone new, not everyone's an entrepreneur, right? Not everyone can wake up and just start creating opportunities out of thin air. So having someone that can teach you how to do that and how to get through a contract and a transaction effectively is really valuable to have a team partner.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest, I don't want to say mistakes, because it led me to where I'm at now, but like, we have a guy, Chip, on our team, came here from California with no real estate experience, 0. 4 kids. I think all 4 kids are under the age of 6. Wife wants to stay home. I mean, has a big why, meaning needs to be able to produce enough money to fund this lifestyle that they have. And he came in and was like, look, I know I don't have anything to offer you guys at the team. I don't have any experience, but if you guys will just teach me and show me, what to do, I'll do it. And so we set him on a course, and he joined the team 2.5 years ago, and he is our top producing buyer agent. He's going to make over $300,000 this year of his own personal take home money. And his first year, I think he did 25 deals. And if he was going to try to do this on his own, kind of like when you started like doing your own thing, there's no way, like even with me, it's like, there's no way you can do that because you don't have the brand name, you don't have the marketing power, you don't have the leads. So to me, if you're an agent that's watching this and you've been in the business a couple of years and you're not quite where you want to be, I would highly recommend joining a team, being involved in a group of people who can collaborate on a daily basis. And when you're around a lot of other top producers, you naturally start seeing what they're doing. You're all of a sudden aware, like, oh, wow, like Jim over here sits in his office for 2.5 hours and makes phone calls. No wonder he's making this money. You know what I mean? So you just get the context for what successful people are doing, which I think is huge.
Yeah, surrounding yourself with other successful people will breed success for sure.
Yeah.
And another understated thing that you don't know when you get in and you join a big name brokerage, I don't want to say they don't care about you, but they're not building your business, right? They're not going to invest in you. They're not going to build it. You've got to do a lot of things on your own if you don't have a team. That's why it's very important to get someone that has a reason to invest in you, even if you've got to give up 50-50, right? Just get somewhere. If you don't have traction and you don't have transactions, it's really hard to build on nothing. So even 50-50 is better on 10 transactions than 90% on, 3.
Yeah, I think that was on a bigger scale. That was very true for me. I was doing around year 3 was kind of like when I started hitting my stride. Years like 3, 4, and 5, I think on my own, I was doing about 35 transactions a year. And when I joined the Wall team, I think it was my second or third year after being here and understanding the systems, understanding the things, I did 92 deals that second or third year on the team. And what was crazy about that is I made way more money doing 92 deals with the splits that we have here than I ever did at the higher split percentage when I was doing 35 deals. Sure. But my marriage and my time with my kids and all the things that I want, that I prioritize, I had a lot more time doing those things. So I was actually doing more deals, making more money, and having more of a work-life balance. So you can have it all in this business. It's just, you got to find the right setup.
Sure. Yeah. And doing higher volume doesn't mean you lose work-life balance. It doesn't.
Yeah.
And that's a misnomer, right? Like even, generally I close about 100 deals a year just on my own. And I realized that when I closed 20, 30 deals, my work-life balance wasn't any better.
Right.
It's actually better now because I don't do a lot of the entry-level things that would distract from my time and just not worth my effort. Like I need other people to take care of those things. So I think I could really share that sentiment. The work-life balance can still be in track whenever you're doing high volume for sure.
I watched it wasn't a podcast. So it was on Instagram. I saw it was Jeff Bezos or it was Steve Jobs when he was alive. I can't remember now exactly what it was, but they were talking about work-life balance and how they don't like using that word because it implies, and I never thought of it this way until they said it. And I was like, yeah, that's true. So work-life balance implies that like basically if you're doing well at one thing, you're not doing well at another.
Right.
And we're trying to create this equilibrium of balance, which is what work-life balance by nature stands for. So like we're constantly kind of, week in, week out doing this teeter-totter. And he said, but in reality, it really shouldn't be work-life balance. It should be called work-life harmony. And what he meant by work-life harmony is when you are satisfied at work, when you are producing at a high level, when you're excited to wake up every day and serve your clients, you're better to be around at home. Like you're a more positive person to be around at home versus you can have all the balance in the world staying at home, not doing anything, but your wife and kids are miserable when they're around you because you're not happy because you're not being successful. So like success and doing the things that you want to do, it's a harmony. It's like they're working together constantly. And I think if more people would frame it in that context, I think it would help, especially real estate agents who can burn out pretty quickly. If, you're a top producer and, having a lot of success, it's hard to figure out how to make it work. But I think if if your spouse or your kids understand the harmony that goes into it, I think it's worked well for me, at least.
No, I think it's a really good point. And here's another thing that I think about, like we talk about volume. Volume is what's going to create long-term success. And I don't mean to say it subtly. So if I'm an individual agent, I'm probably not going to likely get to 100 transactions a year without some type of team or other elements into it. So we'll go back to the original assumption. You building it on your own, you might only get about 10, 12 deals a year on your own, even if you kept 100%. It would be better for you to do 30 or 40 and even give up half. Because what happens, and this is what I try to explain to people that are coming into this, the objective is to, even if you have to give 50-50 or more, whatever the transaction, split is, if you start pocketing those transactions and those relationships and those clients, that's where the referral base comes from.
Yeah.
When you're only closing 10 to 12, it's going to take you a while to get up to 40 or 50. But if you can do 40 or 50 in the first year, you're going to jump at some point. Even if you left and did on your own thing, you've got your own database of really quality, good referrals that you can build and tap into, and it's going to multiply. And I think people forget that you got to have transactions in order to multiply future transactions.
Yeah. I think people get so caught up in the whole, like, I'm giving up something again in real estate. Like, oh, well, if I'm with, well, I won't say a specific brand, but anyway, the point is like there's different tier structures and things. And there's some companies where you can pay a flat fee per transaction, other takes, more splits. But I always I'm like, all I care about at the end of the year is what kind of life did I get to live and how much money did I put in the bank, right? And so like, if those two things are positive, what you gave up really to me is irrelevant because it's a lot of business you might not have had anyway. Like for our agents, we have 2 agents this week that are closing $2 million over. One's a 2.3 and others 2.4. Those are deals that they wouldn't have had on their own. They're getting 50-50 on a $2.4 million transaction. That amount of money is way more money than they would have made if they were keeping 90% of business that they weren't generating. You know what I'm saying? So I think getting past the point where it's all about the split, I think that's where it throws a lot of agents off from really obtaining the life that they want to live because they're worried about, oh, I have to give up this percentage of the commission versus focusing on what they're getting and their time back.
100%. So let me share it this way. This maybe I'll put some perspective on it. So I've created something called a broker on demand option to make it available for boutique offices and even flat fee agencies that don't have broker support, right? It goes back to kind of what you say, most people get on this hyper focus. Well, I'll pay $400 a transaction and I'm going to sell, I'll make more money. But the problem is they don't sell any more houses.
Yeah.
And most of them die off because they don't sell enough houses to make it work, even though they're only paying $400 a transaction. And I can promise you a broker is not going to support 5,000 agents giving them $400 a transaction. There's not enough money for them to be available and be able to accommodate and take care of it.
Right.
So I created something as probably part of a problem solving offer to agents that are in those places. I charge a subscription service and I'm available to solve their real estate problems for them.
That's interesting.
It's just addressing an issue. So if you want to stay at the flat fee and you don't have broker support, I'll help you stay at the flat fee and I'll give you broker support. Even though I know that you're in a short-term lived business because you don't have a team, you're building it all on your own, and you're saving a few dollars every transaction you got to do volume. If you don't do volume, you can't build on it. You can't build on it. You got to close houses.
Well, it's also not fun. I think it's so much more fun to sell houses. It's so much more fun to be doing deals versus trying to
marketing and dry, cold calling and all that stuff. Let's just, absolutely. That's a very critical component. So we talked about work-life balance. I think that's a real important thing. And most people don't even touch on or really address it. You're at a stage in your life, though, that you know the importance of it. And it's worth trading a lot of things to make sure you maintain it. That's a really good value add on there. When you close a transaction, or you mentioned the 2.4, 2.1, are they closed under the individual agent or do you do it under the team lead or the broker?
Yeah, we do it all under one, all under Lori, who's our head broker, I guess you could call him. So we do it all under the same umbrella. So that way every team's a little different with how they do that. And again, there's probably pros and cons to that from the viewpoint of an agent going, well, wait a second, I closed that deal. The team that we have and we've built, and like what I ultimately ended up coming to the place of, because I never wanted to join a team, by the way. I'm super passionate about teams because I've seen the benefits in my own life, but like I was someone who I hated the idea of being involved in a team because I think most teams are dysfunctional. And what I mean by that is when you hear about real estate teams all the time, but what it really is, and if you're an agent watching this and you're considering a team, you need to look and ask for the numbers. And why I say that is most teams are dysfunctional because it's a dictatorship. It's a head agent who is the team lead, who has been successful in their career, and they want more leverage in their life. And so what they'll do is they'll cherry pick the best deals, and then they'll give the rest that they don't want to work to whoever else is on the team. And they call that a team, and that's not a team. Like I said, I call it a dictatorship because you have someone at the top who's just pulling all the strings, controlling everything. That is not, to me, the model that a truly successful team is, where you have someone at the rainmaker or whoever's name is on it. Their goal is to help the other team members be as successful as they can and give them all the business. That's the way it really should work. And that way you have trust within the team. There's a reason to be on the team other than just the camaraderie. You're actually getting deals that you wouldn't have normally have gotten that are actually good. They're actually not just the dregs that someone else didn't want, So
Sure. Yeah. And I think you get to a certain point and it's good that they don't have to be in the production because the team is at a high enough volume that they don't have to be picking out. And we used to like cannibalizing the opportunities, right?
And that's like,
I built businesses before with Zillow, and I paid for a lot of that stuff on realtor.com. And I gave that, I don't want to work with people that don't know me. It's just kind of I don't know. I've just always been this way. It's fortunate that I've been able to go from scratch to selling a ton of real estate without having to do cold calling or postcards or anything. I have no marketing. I do my podcasts, I have training programs, and I have a heavy referral database. I mean, real heavy.
That's awesome.
So that's the way I've always going to grab it. But I can understand, like, I like you call it a dictatorship, where you have someone that is pulling all the strings, they make all the calls, and they get to decide where and how they work, and then everybody else gets the scraps. Yeah, that's hard to really promote and build up other agents when they see that, right? They see that in direct cannibalism.
Well, that's why like one of the questions I wish I knew to ask early on that I tell anyone interviewing for any real estate office is I want to know how much, like, what's not just like what your top producer's making, but I want to know like what your average agent is making, because that to me tells you the proof is in the pudding when you get down to the actual like income per agent. Like you can say, oh, our office has sold 100 million this year. Well, if you have 800 agents and 50 of them are doing 90% of the business, and you've got 700 agents who are doing nothing, 1 or 2 deals a year, that's not, to me, that's not exciting. But if you find an office where you're like, yeah, our average agent makes 150 a year to 250 a year. Our top producers make 300 to 400. The lowest producer on the team is doing 50 to 80. Well, it's like, okay, at least now like what you can expect if you join that office. And I think that's a real important thing for an agent to look into. And if they're not willing to share that information with you, you probably got your answer.
Yeah. Oh, no, for sure. And I would think, as you would guess, most big box brokerage facilities, 90% are not selling that much real estate in general. But if we go down and drill down to a team, it would be even hard pressed to find even your lowest producers are still making money. But there's enough available opportunity, and you only take in what you can provide.
Yeah.
That makes a difference. That means that anyone on the team is making money, and that's a good place. I mean, that's a big sellable.
We have a rule in our team where if bringing someone else on the team would take away from the opportunity of the existing team members who have helped us and build this team over the years, we're not going to bring someone on the team. And I think that's the average agent in our company has been here, I think 6 or 7 years. Yeah. And for a team, that's a pretty long time. We've got several people that are like myself, 10, 11, 12 plus years. And I think that builds trust when hey, If the business grows to a point where we need new people, we'll go recruit and bring people in because high tide rises all the boats. But if there's not room for someone on the team, we're not gonna go recruit and bring someone on if it's gonna take away from the rest of the group. So
For sure. All right. Last thing I want to cover is anything particular with market trends. That was something that I think you wanted to cover or talk about. Anything unique that you see where we are today? We just had the election. I think most of us are seeing some energy again back in the market.
yeah, I think as far as trends in the marketplace, I think everyone is pretty excited, whether your candidate won or lost. I think everyone's just excited that the election's over. The pressure of all the stress, all the negativity, all the anxiety around the what ifs and the scenarios and that. At the end of the day, people get back to life, pretty quickly after an election's over. I'm super optimistic. I went to Inman Connect in Austin a few months ago, and they had all sorts of chief economists and CEOs of big companies that spend a lot of money in research. And the general consensus among the top brass there was that we're going to see a 10 to 12% increase in unit volume next year in 2025, which is huge. We've been kind of in a 3 or 4 year pattern where each year transaction volume across the board has been going down and down for different reasons. So
Yeah, 10% sounds great, but we're also at the lowest we've been in like 30 years on transaction count.
it's
So
crazy.
anything up is good, but we have a long
Everything
ways to rebound.
I was looking at some research about like just the city of Colleyville, and it's mind-boggling to me. Like, I think year to date, when I looked at the time I looked at this, I think there was like 280 transactions in the entire city of Colleyville, which, like, Colleyville's not Dallas. I get that, but there's enough houses here where you're thinking like there's only been 280 transactions in this year. That's a pretty wild low amount for the number of houses. That's that many people that are not moving or transacting. So interest rates will be an interesting thing to watch. I think that's holding a lot of people on the sidelines. But, the general consensus I've been hearing is that interest rates will slowly start to come down over time. I don't think we're ever going to get back to the 3 or 4%. But what I'm telling our team is if interest rates get down to a point where there's a 5 in the number, it's no longer a 6, a 7, or an 8 at one point. If it gets to be 5, I don't care if it's 5.99, the market is going to explode. There is so much pent-up demand. And if the general public gets to a place, especially those who own their own homes that are locked into those low rates that we saw during COVID when the government was trying to keep our economy open and they, basically did whatever they could to keep things moving. There's a lot of people that are sitting on a 3.5%, 3% mortgage that don't want to move because the cost to then move into a bigger, more expensive house and increase their monthly payment. That's a real thing for a lot of people. But there is a point in which people have to move on with their life. And I think a lot of people are hitting that point where the house that they have the interest rate on that's 3% doesn't serve their family's needs anymore. And if they can get a rate that is at least somewhat in the ballpark, they'll start making the moves, and we'll start seeing first-time homebuyer market. Can we talk about that for a second?
Sure.
It's almost non-existent.
It is. Yeah.
If you're it's a huge problem. I mean, that's like, for the real estate economy to really work, you need first-time homebuyers entering the market because they buy the houses that then the person who was the first-time homebuyer moves up, and then they move up and they move up. When you don't have a first-time homebuyer market, that's why I think you see such stagnation in the overall transaction numbers, because if you don't have that population between the ages of 25 and 32 that are buying their first homes and everyone's renting or living with their parents or whatever, it then prevents the people that are 32 to 37 that need that next house to sell because there's nowhere for them to move. Anyway, it's just a whole domino effect.
Well, okay, so there's some evolution here. Okay, if we go back, we have a generation that they weren't buying homes, they weren't getting married, they weren't having kids, they would rather have a dog than a kid.
Right, that's true.
And they're not getting married till their late 30s. And buying a house is not a priority. We also just got through that generation.
Yeah.
The generation coming up now is interested in buying homes. Mm-hmm. But here's the problem. Before COVID, rents would be, let's say, at $2,000 a month. I could find a home reasonably close within 10% of that number and be able to buy and move in. That's a 150 to 250 house. That 150 to 250 house is now 350 plus. Okay. Yeah. So what's happened is I'm still paying roughly $2,000 a month in rent because rent didn't go up much in the last 4 or 5 years.
Correct.
But that house payment on a 350 house is 3,000, 3,200 plus a month. That's too much for someone to make that jump. That's one of the problems that's happened, in addition to a whole period of time where nobody was buying homes that were in their 20s and 30s. So all of that's kind of compounded that problem. And quite honestly, and you probably know, I mean, where you're centrally located, the new builds is going to be like 800,000 plus. But if you go on the outskirts, if you see a house under 350, there's almost no reason to not buy a new build. And that's crushing that market under 350. I've sold right now, I have 12 new builds under contract right now. And that's because I couldn't sell them a new home or a pre-owned. I said, dude, drive 10 more minutes, get a 4% interest rate, don't pay any closing costs, and just deal with it for 5 years. I can't even remotely compete with that on the pre-owned market. So that's also killed that market of buyers. So then you have institutional buyers that were absorbing a lot of these under sub 350 houses. That's also competing against the people. So even if you wanted to buy one of those houses, you actually have to pay the market price. So that's a lot of things that are kind of compounding, working against it. But there is a lot of pent up energy. There is a lot of pent up. Eventually people are going to have to move. I'll give you one other real interesting thing. With the interest rates in the threes, there are also unintended consequences that when general people are always moving up, unless they retire and they need to downsize. For most generations, most people are on this moving up pace. I want a bigger house, nicer car, whatever. What happened is when you got locked in at 3% and you run out of money and you can't afford that because of taxes and insurance, you can't move down.
Right.
Because now you're getting a 6% loan on the same quality house. So your payment's way higher. Even if you cut, let's say you go out into the sticks. I've even tried to do it myself because I got a 3% interest rate. And on our main home, we've got a bunch of houses, but the main home that we have, I was saying, well, what if we take advantage of one of these 3.5% new build opportunities and we get a 3,000 square foot, 5-bedroom house? It would cost me like $1,000 more a month than our Flower Mound house with 5 bedrooms. And I'm like, I can't do it. Like, I'm not going to take, there's no reason to do it. Even at 3.5, I still can't do it.
Right.
So there's a move down problem.
Yeah. That's
People get stuck there, right? They can't move at all. So that's the other group that's stuck. You got a 3%, you're going to have a hard time moving.
Yeah. That's a good point.
So those are some things that I've run into. So Dillan, it's a great conversation. I really appreciate you doing this. We'll probably have to do it again because there's a lot of other things we could cover. What's the best way to reach and get in contact with you?
Well, anytime, anyway, my cell phone number, I can give you that, 817-727-3314. Email address is Dillon@wallteam.com. I'm on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, X. So if you just Google Dillan McDonald Wall Team, that's another easy way to do it. But
awesome. Well, very good time. I really appreciate you doing this with me. Again, if you want to reach out to our celebrity Dillan McDonald, just reach out to me and I can connect you. It's been a great interview. I appreciate it. Thank you.
I appreciate you. Take care.
That wraps up another episode of Real Estate Success DFW. I hope you're leaving with new insights that push your real estate career forward. If you enjoyed the show, please be sure to subscribe, leave a review, or share it with fellow agents who's ready to succeed. And if you're interested in working together or have any questions, I'd love to hear from you. Reach out to me directly. My personal phone is 214-228-0383. Let's connect and make real estate success happen together. Until next time, keep pushing forward. I'm Shaune Corbett, and this is the Real Estate Success DFW. Have a high performance week.